It is playoff football once again, ladies and gentlemen. One of the moments this podcast has been waiting for. We also love the regular season, more so when it's a better regular season, but we do love the regular season. But what do we love even more than that? The postseason. This is where it matters, boys. The final 12 teams have made it, and we are here to discuss that and more on yet another edition of your favorite NFL podcast, Sweeping the Nations, for 91 episodes now. Oh, we're getting closer to the triple digits, fellas. I did not think we would get this far. And joining me, per usual, on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, myself, the Iceman Jurg. I'm joined by, I'm going to start at the bottom of the screen this time because I think it's worth noting. You see the headline at the bottom, the People's Pick Challenge champion. The second season of the hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge concluded last week, and the results of the weekend bore fruit. The Podfather, from third place to first, is the champion. Rick, as the first inaugural winner, welcome to the club. We welcome you with open arms.
Thank you. It's a true underdog story. It really is, and it's hopefully they'll have a better title reign than other underdogs that won, because there's that feeling about it's all about the chase. The chase is the most exciting thing, and then once you win the title, you have a lackluster reign. So I'm kind of hoping that I don't have that, but I'm going to revel in the fact that on the 91st episode, the episode with the same number as the birth year of the Podfather, I am the Pick Challenge champion. So it's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And I can tell you, Rick, heavy is the head that wears the crown. It is harder to come back and keep your title than it is to just win it for the first time. So it's a new challenge.
I got a big fat head too, so it's already heavy as it is. So I put the crown on; it's even heavier. So
this is going to be something to say at the very least. Cannot wait until next season. I think next season is going to be a lot of fun for us on the show. Will it be fun for this guy? I wish I could edit your guys' like little taglines at the bottom, because I would make his hashtag finish the story right now. He is in. I think he's doing his own darkness retreat without telling us. Our games master. I don't know where he secluded himself off to. I don't know how he's looked. Maybe his beard grew 5 sizes because of all the stress. Justin, how we doing, brother?
He looks like a Detroit Lions fan circa 2008. I love it.
Or when the Saints, like when they were so bad, they called themselves the Aints, and they put, oh my God. Justin wearing the gimmick. We appreciate it, Justin. I know it's been rough. I know it's obviously not been easy, but how are we feeling?
Great. It's been a great week. I'm having a good time, and no, I'm miserable. This is hard. 2 years in a row.
He said this is hard. Oh my God, poor Justin. I feel for you, brother. I do feel for you, man. It's just it's rough to say the very least. I'm amazed the audio's still clear though.
It almost makes me feel bad enough to give you the crown. Almost.
That's not how it works, though.
Not happening.
You guys wondered why you couldn't hear me in pre-show? This is why. I was wearing it the whole time.
It's the bag. Is that a biggie bag from Wendy's, by the way? That's kind of what it is.
I believe it's a key food bag.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good. That's worth the 5 cents that you paid to buy it with key food.
So wait, I'm actually very curious. How did you know like the perfect spot to make sure you put the eye holes in?
Well, I didn't. Originally, I did it up here, and I had to lower it.
Yeah, no. Don't you see the little cat eye he has going on?
I do.
Yeah.
That's not for fashion. That's a myth.
Well.
hey, you got it after that. So that's
we can call it fashion. That's fine.
Maybe this will be a new trend. So while Justin's misery this week is sponsored by Key Food for the people, ladies and gentlemen, the pick challenge has come to an end, but the actual NFL games that matter, they're finally here. It is the NFL postseason. We are going to be talking about the slate of games and the interwoven connecting points as he finally takes off the bag.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
The connecting points that put some of these games together, because we're going to have a very fun way that we're going to talk about these games rather than going AFC then NFC. We're going to talk about the ways that these games are similar to one another, to say the very least. So we'll be doing that later in the show. The middle of the show, we're going to talk about, in case you guys are, well, you see the title of the show of this episode for a reason. A lot of changes happening in positions of power throughout the NFL. We're going to talk about just a little bit of that because we're more so going to wait until the positions get filled for the most part. A few have been taken so far, but there's still plenty more to be seen. And we will talk about that maybe as we get closer to the end of the postseason, if not once the offseason begins in proper. But before that, We have fun football chaos as the tagline. Let's start with the fun, and let's start with a mind-blowing fact of the week. Rick, give it to the people.
Gentlemen, if the Rams face the Texans in the Super Bowl this season, or if we have an Eagles-Chiefs rematch, those games will be matches between teams that have had the same record in the regular season. Now, this is not an uncommon phenomenon because this has happened before plenty of times, but there's one stretch in NFL history where this happened 3 years in a row, where the teams from the AFC and the NFC had the same record going into that Super Bowl from the regular season. Let me take you back, cast your minds back to the 1998-99 NFL season. In 99, you had the number 1 seed Denver Broncos and the number 2 seed Atlanta Falcons. Both teams going into that Super Bowl 14-2. Now, the Falcons were the number 2 seed because the Vikings, and I don't want to bring up any more about Minnesota because they're frauds. So, moving on from there. The following season, after the 99 Super Bowl in 2000, the great 1-yard short game, you had the St. Louis Rams and the Tennessee Titans. Both teams were 13-3 going into that Super Bowl. And again, great game. The best game of the 3 because the third game was the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Giants in 2001. And let me tell you something, that game sucked. But both teams went into that with a 12-4 record. So it is one of the rare times that we've seen in 3 straight years, 2 teams with the same record going into the Super Bowl. Now, as I said, it's happened before. The other memorable time it happened was 1992. So after the Gulf War Super Bowl, when the Cowboys faced the Bills in a game that ended, 52-17. So, I mean, the harbinger is you can either have a really good game like Rams-Titans or a terrible game like the other 3 because Broncos-Falcons was not very good either. So, like I said, looking at the records, there's no NFC team that has a 13-4 record. So if the Ravens get in, or that matter if the Niners get in, because no AFC team with a 12-5 record, this goes away. So we have a good shot if we have an 11-6 or a 10-7 team make it to the Super Bowl, which would kind of cause chaos, which is what we on the show love. Again, the thought of a Rams-Texans Super Bowl isn't exactly the most enticing, or a Rams-Steelers Super Bowl until you think about the records going in, and this is interesting. Both teams are the same record, but one team won their division, and one team, is the Steelers. So, there's that.
Amazing fact, Rick. Again, you always bring it, and same record Super Bowl as we see in the ticker down below. That is something that is very entertaining, and it feels not that it's just wholly uniquely football. I mean, it probably is because it's a smaller season, but I'm almost curious of how often that's happened in the other, of the big 3 North American professional sports, because those seasons are so much longer. I feel like it's very much a rarity.
I almost want to say it's virtually impossible. I mean, when you talk about basketball and baseball, you have definitive wins and losses. I think it's next to impossible in hockey because of all the ties and everything too, and the overtime losses from years gone by. But football's the easiest one because again, you got 16 now 17 regular season games, and So and again, that would be interesting too because if the Steelers do make it to the Super Bowl, that's the best 7 seed showing from our boy and friend of the program, Mike Tomlin. So
yes, if either of these 2 7 seeds are able to make a run here, it'd be the most successful so far because the 7 seed has yet to win a postseason game since it's been implemented just a few short years ago. Will that change soon? Maybe. We'll see. We'll talk about that later in the program. But for now, before we continue on to the football, let's have a little bit more fun. Justin, a would you rather is on the plate. What do you got for us?
All right, guys. Good news, actually. You were walking down the street and you found $100 on the floor. But the caveat is the only reason you're allowed to take that $100 is you have to place a bet. If you were going to bet on one AFC wildcard team to win this week, who are you taking and why?
I thought this was a question of morality at first. Do you keep the $100 or do you
all know that I'm
give it to charity or find the Little Sisters of the Poor, give it to them or something like that?
I have no morality. I want you to place a bet
on an AFC wildcard team.
AFC wildcard team.
Why not the NFC wildcard teams? Out of curiosity,
because the answer would probably be the Eagles.
And I also think if between the two, I think it's if you had to pick a wild card bet, I think a lot of people would be more tempted in the NFC to pick more upset picks. I think between the two of them, in terms if we want to go with the idea of upsets, I think people are more going to pick upsets there. Whereas I think Justin's focusing on the AFC because some of the favorites going in like line wise are like stronger.
I suppose that's fair.
That's not really what I was going. I thought that the AFC, the matchups were much closer. I mean, the one matchup that I thought was, probably the most distant would be Buffalo versus Pittsburgh. But with all that weather going on there, I think that favors Pittsburgh greatly. So that's the exact game that Pittsburgh's going to want to play.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I had to place a bet, I'm probably going NFC. I'd probably pick the Eagles over Tampa Bay, which, again, the way the Eagles have played the last few weeks, I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
To me, that seems like the most sure of a thing.
I vouch for the Rams over the Lions. I know we're talking AFC, but I vouch for that game because I think having Kupp and Nakua against that Lions secondary is a pretty tantalizing matchup if I'm the Rams are better in that pace. But
that Rams offensive line is rough.
I
think that the defensive line.
We'll get to the analysis a little bit.
Okay,
so the AFC, right?
So staying in the AFC,
free $300 bet, Rick. We found this money.
Yes, I'm not going to my daughter's college fund, so I got to put it on the NFL. Great, thanks. Thanks,
can
Roger.
Put the winnings into the college fund.
Sure, I could do that.
There you go.
Who's
give you the most
all right.
money?
So of the three, I think. See, so is Cleveland technically the underdog against Houston?
No, they're favored, but I think Justin more so means like it doesn't matter underdog or favorite. Like pick any of these.
I'll decide who are you betting on.
I'll decide. Okay. I think that I would bet on Houston because you know what,
it's a wild card team.
Well,
I think he means the 5, 6, or 7 seed.
You want the wild card teams, not the. Yeah, okay. That's why I was thinking like an underdog. I was talking about that, but okay. If I was okay.
So Browns, Steelers, or Dolphins? Right?
Well, not betting on the Dolphins because they're so banged up right now that it's just impossible to go for it. I mean, I guess the one matchup that makes the most sense for me to bet would be that Browns Texans matchup, and I guess if all things being equal, I would go Cleveland because, I mean, I don't think CJ Stroud has faced the defense like this. Like, Myles Garrett is leading that defense. Owusu Koromoa is still there too for them as well. I know they have a few guys that are hurt. I think Grant Delpit is out, which does hurt their secondary. But again, Houston's depleted. They got lucky because Nico Collins had a phenomenal game in Week 18 against the Colts. And obviously they got lucky again because the Jaguars decided to, be the Jaguars. But I don't know if that's sustainable. I think the Texans are that lucky team that got in. The Browns, if all this being equal, if the Browns weren't in the same division as the Ravens, they would win another one of these divisions because that's how good they were this season. And so I feel like they're the best chance to spring an upset here of the wild card teams. Again, it's a mild upset because of seeding, but you're right. The Browns are more favored in this game, so I would probably put my $100 on Cleveland and hope for the best.
I don't blame you at all, and I would probably. And if T.J. Watt was healthy, I think we would both consider Pittsburgh way more. And also if the quarterback situation was better. And I'm not even saying Pickett over Rudolph. I'm just saying someone with a pulse over Rudolph at this point.
You know what it is, too? It's not only that. It's that we saw it last week in the rain. Jalen Warren had a really hard time keeping control of the football. And so when Najee Harris has to be spelled in the snow, I don't trust Jalen Warren to do it. So, that kind of siphons their offense to the one person, which is Najee Harris. He's a great running back, but I don't trust it either.
And the Browns, despite the Nick Chubb injury, which can you imagine if he was healthy, man? What this team would be. Honestly, if Nick Chubb was healthy, first off, maybe they challenge the Ravens more so for the division. But if you keep them as is and Nick Chubb was healthy, I don't think we can. I think the Browns deserve to be maybe second in the conversation of winning the AFC if we had a healthy Nick Chubb right now. I'm with you. I think I have to pick Cleveland as for the wild card teams. I think they're in the most favorable matchup definitively. And I know Pittsburgh has the potential of the weather to go their way, but sans that, I think the Browns facing a young QB who, again, CJ Stroud has been phenomenal this season, leagues above what anyone would have expected of him coming into this season. But this is, like you said, Rick, this is the best defense he's facing in a little bit on the schedule. Like the AFC South is not known for their strong defenses, to say the very least. And the Colts secondary, especially, is not impressive in any way, shape, or form healthy. And the Browns banged up are still better than the Colts, defense. So that just goes to show, what the standard is there. And I think this Cleveland defense is just shown that they can win a game by themselves, literally. And maybe this isn't necessarily the quarterback they would take advantage of, but this is probably the closest too. Because yes, while he's been amazing, still a rookie quarterback, and things get ratcheted up a little bit. But that being said, I think CJ Stroud will still be fine enough. But this Browns defense is going to be a problem, and that Browns offense is somehow unlocked a different level to themselves. Amari Cooper, this is the best he's looked, I think, in a couple years. And David Njoku. It took Joe Flacco being the quarterback for the Browns to finally figure out how to use this 6'6", 6'7", just athletic tight end freak out of the University of Miami. We've been waiting for this David Njoku since he got drafted. This has always been his potential. If you just line David Njoku up with the best tight ends in the league, physically, he is one of the elite tight ends in this game. He has the potential. It probably took a little bit from his first 2-3 years. I never understood how it took, coach after coach not figuring out how to use this kid. But Stefanski's been there for a few years, but Stefanski with Flacco, they've finally been able to unlock that. And Kevin Stefanski clearly, in some way, shape, or form, is a branch off the Shanahan tree, because it doesn't matter who the running back is, they're able to get these guys 75 to 80 yards per game. To me, my $100, I'm putting it on the Cleveland Browns. Could you imagine us saying that a year ago?
Okay, well, here's an offshoot. If the Browns win the Super Bowl this year with Joe Flacco, does that undo everything he did in Baltimore? Will they go hating him now because he had to beat them to win the Super Bowl, basically?
I got a better question. If they win the Super Bowl and he is somehow the Super Bowl MVP again, does that make him a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad question to ask.
Because can you keep a 2-time Super Bowl MVP out of the Hall of Fame?
Was he 36, 37? And again, it's the same thing. If you look at Eli Manning, not the greatest quarterback of all time, but 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl MVPs.
And the Manning last name.
Joe Flacco, not the greatest quarterback of all time, but if he does, 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, why would you keep one out and not the other? I mean, what a world we live in now, where we're now considering Joe Flacco a Hall of Famer. It's like if the Connor Hellebuck being a Hall of Famer in the National Hockey League, 4 years ago you wouldn't even think of it, but now, ugh.
What on earth? What world have we entered into? What timeline is this? Where we're
also by the way, the pain and agony in Jets fans, because if Flacco wins the Super Bowl with the Cleveland Browns, and you could have kept him.
We knew that the issue wasn't Joe Flacco. I mean, listen, I didn't believe in Joe Flacco, but I knew that wasn't the issue. I mean, clearly there's bigger issues in New York than who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
By the way, the Audubon, New Jersey native Joe Flacco, who went to the University of Delaware, is presently 38 years old, and he turns 39 in 3 days.
Wow. Well, happy birthday to that. 39 years old.
38 years old.
Joe Flacco
wins the Super Bowl in Cleveland.
He's the OG Joe Cool then.
He has been waiting. So 2017 was the last time he played a full regular season, and since then it's always been less games. Yeah. He's just been saving this all for one last run, one last hoorah, and this might be it.
and to do it with the Browns of all franchises, the Browns.
Yep.
And
that's who we picked in this week's Would You Rather.
Yes, it would be amazing. It would be amazing for sure.
Oh my God. So Justin, phenomenal Would You Rather there. That was a real brain tester, to say the very least, and can't wait for a few more. The return of the games in proper as we go through this NFL postseason. The show is really going to get back in order. But speaking of getting things in order, a lot of teams are going to need to do that this offseason, ladies and gentlemen. The offseason started early for 20 teams around the National Football League, and especially these teams that need to hire new people in power. Bunch of coaching changes occurred. We're going to talk, like I said at the start, in more general discussion here. We're not going to go too in depth in all these teams that need to hire people because A, there's a lot. B, there's playoff games to talk about. And C, let's just wait until some people actually get hired, Earlier this week, at one point, there was 8 head coaching vacancies and 5 general manager vacancies that were available. So 13 positions of power were just generally open in the league. Since then, from them over the last 24 to 48 hours, 2 of those positions have been filled. 1 general manager spot's been filled, that being the Washington Commanders, and 1 head coaching spot has been filled, that being a team in the AFC East I'm gonna wait a moment before we talk about that because a certain coach had to step away for that to happen. But Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first, just because we were reacting to it, amongst each other in chat. What was your just reaction to the fact that at one point 8 head coaching spots were open this year? Where obviously we talk about it on the show, we do the head coach hot seat as one of our shticks in the season now. But did we? I don't think the three of us expected 8 head coaching spots to be open at the end of the season initially. So.
Well, 2 of them were major surprises for me, and that being obviously the longest tenured ones there, which would be Pete Carroll, who I believe this is more of like a retirement move. He's an older coach, so it makes sense, but it was still shocking to me. I didn't expect to see it coming. And Bill Belichick, who is apparently going to coach somewhere besides New England, which just sounds wrong. I'm happy about it, but it still just sounds wrong. I genuinely cannot believe that I'm not going to have to see that smirkless grin across the field for me anymore, day in and day out. And I'm glad we got a win with him on him at the very end, at least. His last game is a loss to the Jets, which is the biggest victory I'll have as a Jets fan in a long time. So, yeah, shocked. And I'm excited to see where some of these teams go. And honestly, I'm shocked that I'm not shocked at the number. I'm shocked at where they came from, because if you really think about it, there are some other coaches that maybe could have been out and they were not. They were held on to. So.
Right. And, you mentioned 2 of the big ones there. We're going to talk about them in their own little segment here in just a very quick moment. Rick, before we continue on to that, aside from the 2 big ones, the 2 longest tenured ones, as Justin alluded to, which of the did any of the other firings surprise you necessarily, Rick, of the other 6 teams?
Not really. Like we mentioned, 3 of them happened mid-season. So, Brandon Staley, Josh McDaniels, and Frank Reich all kind of, deserved to go. They were all gone. We knew Arthur Smith was probably going to be gone after this season, but the way that it ended was just typical classic Falcons, the way that it ended for them. Ron Rivera was out in Washington too. Again, those are 2 guys that Justin has brought up in our discussions in years past, especially with Ron Rivera. How many 7-10 seasons could he have had to keep him going? Well, it's going to be a 4-13 season. That was the death knell for him. So, there's that. And then I don't know if it was a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to me. It was more of a surprise in the timing of it. Mike Vrabel from Tennessee getting the axe the way that he did, because it didn't happen on Monday like we all thought it would. It happened on the Tuesday. And so that kind of spurred discussions as to, well, maybe we'll see something happen, somewhere else down the line, and it never came to fruition. So, that's a name that you're going to see a lot of teams, even teams that are in the playoffs now that are dissatisfied with their coaches, are going to be talking about possibly angling for him. I was more surprised, like Justin said, at some of the coaches that held on to their jobs that, maybe should not have. I think Dennis Allen in New Orleans, I know we've been talking about him kind of being a mid-tier coach, and kind of, no surprise there. Matt Eberflus in Chicago, I know we had a lot of discussion on. Not sure what the plan is for my Bears. Spoiler alert. But, but we'll see what goes on from there. And then I think, look, yes, they won the division, but can you in any way convince me that Todd Bowles, if they didn't win the division, wouldn't be gone from this Tampa Bay team? Right. I mean, that's the only saving grace is that they won the division, and maybe they sneak out a win in the wild card. We'll talk about that later, because they're playing a team that's reeling right now. But I think also just for my money, Kalen DeBoer, you're a traitor. But I'll save that for my college football podcast that I'm starting later on in the month. So we'll go from there.
Real quick before we do go to the big names, Justin, Rick have briefly mentioned Eberflus. I think the 3 of us were absolutely flabbergasted that Eberflus was still the guy there, despite the fact that they let go basically every other offensive position coach on the staff for the most part. Yeah. So, we're still trying to figure this out.
So my money is on this. Is Eberflus was a defensive guy coming in, right? So, yes. The defense for the Bears was okay. I mean, they have a couple of good secondary pieces in Gordon and Brisker. I know they were kind of hurt towards, the end of the season. But, I mean, again, for a team that finished 7-10 and still has the number 1 overall pick, I understand that Getsy had to be the fall guy. But, I think you're right. I think Ryan Poles attach himself to Eberflus, and I think this is kind of it. If they don't do well this year, they're both going to be gone. I think that's just kind of the way that it's going to go. Somebody had to take the fall, and it had to be the OC because it just wasn't working.
Which you almost wonder when it comes to Ryan Poles. We talked about this. Every GM gets at least one bullet in the chamber, and that's getting to get rid of the first head coach you hired and then bring in the second guy. Be like, okay, first one didn't work. My second one, though, this one is going to handle the job. Most GMs do get that, but that is almost an interesting thing to think about, Rick, where is Poles maybe because he's been, and we don't know what happens behind the scenes. Is he so tied to Eberflus at this point where it is somehow that? I don't want to think that, but maybe the Bears is just more disorganization than we were led to believe before the start of the season. Like, I can't think that he only has one head coach compared to what other GMs in this league have gotten. Tom Telesco, who was also let go during the season, got 3 of them during his tenure. I mean, come on now at that point.
Yeah, but if I'm the Bears organization, I'm not hiring and firing people based on what other teams do. I'm doing what I think is best for my organization. But to be fair, I don't think that they understand what's best for their organization after these moves. If you're going to do a full reset, do a full reset. It doesn't make any sense to have your coach and your GM, who you might fire next year, be there for what might be a full reset on offense when you're going to draft the number 1 overall pick with the quarterback. You're going to maybe move on from Justin Fields. To me, I don't know what this move says. I mean, are you doing a full reset? Are you bringing in new offensive guys to give you a chance to the number 1 overall pick, who's been the crown jewel of everyone's eyes for the last 2 years since he won the Heisman? Or are you going to give Justin Fields another go at it, trade the first round pick, or use it on someone else for whatever reason, like maybe Marvin Harrison? And then if it doesn't work out next year, are you going to give your coaches another couple of years? Because now you're saying, oh, this is a brand new offense. You can't fire someone after basically what is a full reset, right? So then what are you going to do? Are you going to fire the GM and the head coach and do a full reset after next year? And all of a sudden you wasted a full year of Justin Fields. Now the next GM has to make a decision on his contract, or you draft a guy and now all of a sudden you started a rookie in a situation where you fired everyone and now you wasted their first year of their rookie contract. There's so many questions that are not answered that these moves just bring up. I could do a full 2-hour podcast.
We could
myself. There's so many different avenues, and it seems like even they don't know what they're doing. Maybe that's the point. But if you are trying to confuse everyone else and you end up confusing yourself, that's the mark of a bad organization. That was always my issue with the Jets offense, is that you are doing so much to try and fool what the defense is thinking you're going to do. You're trying to fool the defense and the defensive coordinators and stuff that you end up not being able to run a proper play.
And Justin, just so your team is also the team that hired 5 OCs in 5 years.
Well, I'm more so wanting to ask this
about the Bears. I brought up the Jets. I know.
But I'm just saying, it seems like that's kind of the way they're going. Is that it didn't work with this time? How about this offense?
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
You didn't need to fire your head coach right away. If you want to fire him, I would do it now. It doesn't make any sense to half-ass it. If you're going to keep Ryan Poles for another 3 years or so, and you're guaranteeing Eberflus is going to be there for another 3 years, fine. That defense was bad this year. They were well coached, I think. They were rough in the sack numbers. They made a good trade for Allen. They have the ability to move forward, but you need to have a clear plan in place, and it needed to be in place the day you were eliminated from the playoffs. This move, to me, screams that they don't really know what they're doing, because the offense was very, very injured this year. And they still won a few games, and they still played well.
We're forgetting one thing, though. Wasn't this also the team that fired the defensive coordinator back in September after an FBI sting?
Yes.
So how do Eberflus and Poles still have jobs?
So I don't. Yeah, exactly. I honestly forgot about that.
Yeah, like September 20th, Alan Williams is gone after an FBI sting. Guys, guys,
we're not even in the offseason yet. I know I said the offseason starts early for these teams, but we're not
in Chicago
offseason. Not only you are in Chicago, you have nothing. You talk about trying to find a way to answer. I don't even know if they know what the answer is at this point. This team is just lost, and it's maybe, who knows, maybe you lose a fan or two because of the chaos that's happening. You just never know what could potentially happen when it comes to the Chicago Bears this offseason.
One last thing, the Bears owner is 101 years old.
The McCaskies.
Virginia Hallis McCaskey is literally 101 years old. She turned 101 about a week ago. God bless her for living a long life, but
well, we know, even though she's technically the owner, we know it's the kids that are running the show.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
They don't know.
She's
they
the
don't know.
Owner.
They don't know nor care about football. Let's be real here. They know nothing.
Yeah. Like Pete Carroll said, it wasn't football people that fired him as the head coach.
Yeah.
It was business executives. Tepper.
So it just goes to show that business people not as smart as you might think they are when it comes to things that they didn't grow up in. So that being said, let's move on from the just general talk of the coaches. Let's talk about the big three of them. And Rick, I'll throw the prompt to you first. In a span of 24 hours, basically, Pete Carroll, one of the 2 or 3 coaches I think in history to win a college football national championship and a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Nick Saban, 7 national championships won in college, 6 specifically at Alabama. Dynasty maker with the Crimson Tide. More players drafted in the first round in his time as the Bama head coach than losses. It's a wild stat. That could have been a fact of the week as well, or even a trivia. He retired, and of course, then most Super Bowl appearances as a head coach, most Super Bowl wins as a head coach. 6-time Super Bowl champion Bill Belichick gone from the Patriots. 3 just of a generation of fans, and maybe almost 2 generations, you could say, but let's say just a generation of fans. No matter what your thoughts are from the team that you were a fan of, a generation of fans grew up with these 3 in some way, shape, or form for a good 2+ decade span, being some of the most notable faces in football as a whole, are now no longer coaching. As we said, Pete Carroll is now moving in more of the front office role in Seattle, like we said and believe, likely pushed out by people in the Seahawks organization. And like you said, Rick, I don't think football people would have pushed Pete Carroll out. I think it may be more so an executive thing, but Pete Carroll no longer there. Nick Saban chose this time to retire, maybe because he doesn't think he can do in the NIL era. I've heard some people say it's part because the health of his, of his wife and, just being with family more. I could definitely believe that. And then, like Justin said it earlier, Bill Belichick gone, and he's not retiring from coaching. He's going to see if he can find a spot here elsewhere in these other 7 vacant spots. Let's be real here. He's not going to Carolina or Atlanta. So that being said, maybe 5 other spots. But with all that, Rick, your reaction to these 3 titans of this sport no longer in their positions anymore?
Well, don't count on Arthur Blank making a move for Bill Belichick. I mean, that's a possibility in Atlanta. I mean, I know it's not the ideal spot for him, but Arthur Blank's got a big pocket of money, Home Depot money. He can make that work. My cousin and my uncle went to Notre Dame. And so my sister and I grew up being Notre Dame fans. We grew up being Notre Dame fans in the time of the great rivalry between Notre Dame and USC. So I grew up hating Pete Carroll. Nick Saban coached at LSU, and I didn't really mind him that much, but then he went to the Miami Dolphins. And because at the time I was a Jets fan, I grew up hating Nick Saban. Around that time, Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Patriots, who scribbled on the napkin that he resigned as HC of the NYJ. And I grew up hating Bill Belichick. My hatred for Pete Carroll subsided, to be honest with you, because once he left USC and went to the Seahawks, I didn't really mind him that much because, he's a fun guy. Of the 3, he's the guy I want to have a drink with at the bar because he seems like a really fun guy. We'll throw shirtless darts and have a good time. Nick Saban went to Alabama, kept winning, put Alabama on the map, and I hated him even more because I love parodying college football. Bill Belichick was in New England, and the Jets could never win, and it drove me and Nathaniel Hackett being hired to leave him the Jets fandom, and I grew to hate him even more. That being said, the work that these 3 gentlemen have done for the game of football on every level, you cannot discount what they mean to this current generation of players who grew up, and fans who grew up playing NCAA football when USC was still the Kings, when you could still do creative player and have, yourself on Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush's team coached by Pete Carroll, when you were doing Madden or an NFL head coach and you wanted to be that guy to take over for Belichick, assert yourself in New England instead of, going to the Texans, because let's be honest here, in 06, who wanted to go to the Texans? Nobody. It's so weird. And the fact that it'll happen so swiftly is surprising. Belichick, we kind of understood this might be the year because they were talking about it for weeks going into the end of the year. The Pete Carroll and Nick Saban retirements, resignations, firings, whatever you want to call them, threw us all a kilter. Because nobody expected... I mean, Nick Saban was supposed to coach there until he died, like Bear Bryant did back in the 50s and 60s, I think. And Pete Carroll, you thought the guy still had a ton of energy and was beloved by his players. And I mean, now more is coming out about Belichick and his behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm not sure if you guys saw this on Twitter, how Randy Moss convinced him once to have a Halloween party at a roller rink that they were just there by themselves, but it was a Halloween party, and Belichick shows up as a pirate. That's the original Billy Shakes right there, right? So it's great. Now we're kind of getting that humanity side of it. But it's going to be so weird going into this offseason and going into the next season and not seeing any of those guys on the sidelines in any capacity. You want to liken it to Bruce Arians in a way, but it's different because Bruce Arians wasn't as big of a name as these guys. But the impact, or even Bill Cowher, the impact is there, even though it's not that trio of surprises at the same time. So I'm looking forward to 2024, to the football season there, and kind of seeing who's taken over in Seattle, because that's the only spot we don't know of yet, because Kalen DeBoer is the traitor, and we'll talk about the other guy next. So, but it's very interesting.
I'm sure, and before Justin goes here, because especially on the last guy, he's definitely has a lot to say. But I will say, when it comes to these three guys, the motivation that they inspired in other coaches and organizations to want to face them, to want to beat them, to match that standard, and I'm not even saying this from the perspective of people who were coordinators and assistant coaches under them who then became coaches, right? I'm not talking about those specific people, because not exactly the cleanest of coaching trees when it comes to these guys. Let's be fully honest here. And that's not their fault, by the way. They themselves are great. They don't control what their assistants do when they get opportunities. But in regards to seeing them and understanding what it was like there, and people trying to replicate that level of success, that level of energy in Carroll's case, the discipline with Saban and Belichick, the mindset to try to instill. These three inspired, you mentioned fans and players, they inspired a generation of coaches to, whether you're replicating their style or just trying to find your own way to success and greatness in your way. These three are three of the standard bearers in coaching history. And in the in the lineage of coaches and the great coaches that we could potentially talk about throughout all of football, it gets, and this is all sports, because so many different eras and so much is changed, it's very hard in terms of comparison's sake to be like, well, so-and-so was the coach in this decade. It's hard to compare guys 60 years apart sometimes, right? But these are three coaches who, it does not matter how many different eras you want to bring up. These are three of the coaches that will come up in the all-time conversations, especially the latter two men in their respective fields of collegiate and professional football. I don't want to leave Pete Carroll out, because Pete Carroll, again, one of few guys to win it at both levels. That's pretty impressive in his own right. Being able to understand how to work with collegiate players and then with professionals, we've seen that fail on both sides. We've seen professional coaches try to go to college, not do great. We've seen college coaches fail in the NFL. This guy did it both ways, and that deserves a lot of credit. And you look at the latter two men, just the pure standard of excellence. The next head coach that starts to win a couple Super Bowls, and the next head coach that starts to win a couple national championships, the conversation of all-time great coaches now that, one of them is fully stepped away and the other one is going to take his next job, but we know even the clock is ticking there on how long he might be there. We've been able to say that as they were coaching at their peak, but we can now officially say, when the next coach is winning, maybe if Dabo Swinney gets his third national championship, or Kirby Smart. Look, I don't want that, but Rick, I just need to put the hypothetical of if Dabo Swinney gets his third, and Kirby Smart gets his third, if a new head coach starts to win a couple here in this new era of college football, we'll be able to start saying, like, hey, not just can they catch the legacy of Bear Bryant or some other guys, can they catch the legacy of Nick Saban? Can people try to catch up to the legacy of Bill Belichick? We can now really say that for the most part. So I just want to bring that up because these three men, standard bearers for all times, no matter what era, no matter what coaches you bring up, these are three of the guys that will come up in conversations for eternity, to say the very least. Justin, this is a safe space for you to talk about that last guy and what he did to you as a fan for many years of your life. But your idea of the career retrospectives for these three men, basically.
I didn't have time, but I was going to order one of those, those celebratory, like celebrating, exciting times. I no longer, like I said it before, I no longer have to see that scowl across the sideline. But it was nice to have the excuse for a while that, hey, at least we were getting our ass kicked by a Hall of Famer and not some schmuck. We'll see how the Jets handle it, but as they handle most things, I'm not expecting much. But yeah, you guys are right. These are standard bearers. This is a true end of an era in coaching, and hopefully we see a lot of opportunities open up for a lot of younger guys to kind of move in and make their name. But even if we see some certain accolades, I don't know we're ever going to see coaches like this again. I mean, even if you want to say Carroll is a little bit lower than the rest of the other guys, especially because he couldn't coach for the Jets, but Seattle was bad for a decade when he showed up there, and then they won a Super Bowl, went to a second one. I mean, they were a couple plays away from winning two. So it's an interesting day in sports, and we'll see what happens going forward with these coaching opportunities.
To say the very least, and when Justin mentions that, Rick, we could kind of talk about this here briefly, but you are not a Kalen DeBoer fan right now.
No,
to say the very least.
No, I am not. Look, here's my thing. You're moving into the same conference as the team that just whooped you in the national championship stage. And I get it. You're losing your quarterback, your top receivers and everything. But I don't know. The moment that you lose to Vanderbilt, because that will probably happen, or the moment that you lose a non-conference game to Colorado State or Colorado for that matter, when Deion Sanders, when Coach Prime steps all over Tuscaloosa and beats you, you're setting yourself up for failure here. And honestly, I feel bad for Tommy Rees because he's the OC at Alabama, or he was. He's the guy that should have, moved up, I think, because that's kind of how things go in college, is if you have your coordinator kind of step into the role, if you have that opportunity. I mean, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, he was the OC or DC for Brian Kelly, and he moved right in. Spencer Danielson at Boise State. Andy Avalos gets fired from Boise State, and Danielson goes on to win the Mountain West Conference, go 3-0. The first interim coach ever to win 3 straight games and win the conference championship after someone gets fired. To me, it just reeks of, we're Alabama, so we're going to pay for the best head coach available. And you know what? Good on Sark and good on Mike Norville for saying, nah, you know what, Alabama, we're good. We're going to stay with Texas and Florida State and build our programs up here so we can spank you guys later on in the next few seasons. I think that's the way it should have gone. So, Kalen DeBoer, I wish you nothing but no success in Alabama. May you go 0-11 in your first season and get immediately fired after week 5.
Well, he can't go 0-11 and then get fired after week. There needs to be a little bit of thing there, Rick. But that being said, can we just say our thoughts and prayers with Washington next season, because they are losing their head coach, their quarterback, their running back, their top 3 wide receivers, their 2 tight ends, and their left tackle.
They're going to be a 2-win team next year.
Yeah, and it's going to be rough them moving to a new conference, which, by the way, they are moving to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy, to say the very least.
Not pretty.
Not pretty at all. So there's that. Justin, do you have any thoughts of Rick's rant? No rant podium at the end this week, but you got a little bit of a taste of it here, people, when it came to that. What is your thoughts about rant and Rick on Kalen DeBoer?
Damn.
So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the retrospective on these 3 titans of the coaching space. All of them, well, 2 of them not coaching anymore, retiring. One of them going somewhere else we can maybe ask this in perhaps next week. I think we could dive more into the discussion of where we could potentially be seeing Belichick go in that regard and what the fallout could be of where he would go. But again, I think probably more so next week we could discuss that, or even if he does sign by next week, we could talk about where he's going then. But I think that's more the way to go. So shall we move on here, lads? Ladies and gentlemen, the NFL wildcard round is here. The NFL playoffs are here. The 2023 season is over, and the playoffs in the first month of the year 2024 begins today with 2 of the 6 wild card games, or now it's called Super Wild Card Weekend because we had to add the extra seeds. Just wait until it keeps expanding. But in all seriousness, as we go into these matchups, we're going to talk about all 6 games as we did last year. At the very end, we're going to give our predictions for these 6 contests. So, boys, we have a fun way we're going to talk about the wild card weekend this time. I believe last year we kind of went AFC, NFC, or maybe we talked about the games like on the days that happened. We're going to do things a little bit differently this time around because there's a couple connection points between some of these games. I think we can have some fun with talking these connection points. So let's talk about 2 of the games that we have kind of alluded to earlier in the episode in our previous segments. So let's talk about the 2 versus the 7 in both conferences. In the AFC, it is the Buffalo Bills, who in the last week of the season, the last game of the regular season, took the AFC East and the number 2 seed away from the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a little bit of luck go their way to make the postseason, but also very much had to put themselves in the best opportunity possible with beating the Baltimore Ravens in the final game of their regular season to be able to make it to this point. Mike Tomlin, he will never have a losing season for all of eternity, it seems. So that is one of the 2 versus 7s. That is the AFC matchup of it. The NFC matchup of it, Cowboys, Packers. A pretty familiar playoff matchup, but there is no Brett Favre, there is no Aaron Rodgers, but there is Jordan Love. Does that inspire anything? We will see. Justin, I will throw it to you first. Your thoughts on these 2 matchups. You can start with whichever one you want to begin the discourse on and then continue on. But your thoughts about Bills Steelers, Cowboys Packers, general analysis, maybe who you think is the better upset chance between the 2 teams, and what are the odds that maybe these 7 seeds one of them could do something in these playoffs? Again, 7 seed has not won a playoff game yet since the format expanded. So,
well, with the weather going on in Buffalo, like I said before, I think this is a game that very much will favor the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think, maybe Buffalo has the home field advantage because their fans will be rowdy, but Pittsburgh travels. And I know we're missing TJ Watt. I almost said JJ. But let's face it. This is still a Pittsburgh team that plays very good defense. And they can run the ball. And those are 2 things that have been an Achilles heel for Buffalo for a long time now. So we'll see. I'm not necessarily ready to make a pick on those games yet. I think I'm leaning more towards Buffalo because they are technically the better team. But I would argue that Pittsburgh is better coached and they have the better defense overall. In terms of Dallas, Green Bay, it's a very interesting game in my mind because Jordan Love is better than a lot of people wanted to give him credit for going into the season. And I understand that a lot of these games that they won were on defense. The defense has played excellent this year. The run game is finally healthy, which is a very important thing for them. And I think that although Love has been a little hit or miss during the regular season, if he could protect the ball, this could be a closer game than everyone thinks. Dallas, they have arguably the most explosive offense in the league right now, but they're also on offense just very hit or miss. They've had some games where they just could not score. And I'm going to be interested to see what Tony Pollard does because he's been disappointing coming down the stretch. He's not scored a lot of touchdowns. He runs the ball well at times, but he's not getting a ton of yardage for them. They're not being efficient in their run game. And maybe I could change their running back next season if they don't do very well in the postseason. So we'll see what's going on. But I think these games are going to be a lot closer than people think.
Right. And as you mentioned, I think 2 factors there. I'll start with the Cowboys-Packers game here really quick. Jordan Love hasn't thrown an interception since the Giants game from early in the month of December. So it's been a good stretch of time for him to go without throwing a pick. And like you said, with Aaron Jones finally looking good here to end the season, and AJ Dillon as well, one thing that we never really talked about in the time of LaFleur in Green Bay is how much the running game has mattered, I think, more than what most have thought, and how important it is that the running game is going and that they don't shy away from it for them to be in these games. Because part of the reason why, especially early on in the season, there were a lot of struggles is that similar things to what was happening in the past 2 seasons is that for whatever reason, LaFleur just goes away from the running game after the first 2 possessions of the contest. And you need to have that balance, especially to help with the protection that Jordan Love has had with the football. Again, not thrown any interceptions basically a month's time at this point. Although in the conversation we were talking about earlier with CJ Stroud, this is going to be one of the most significant defenses that Jordan Love has faced in quite a bit. This is a Cowboys team with whatever your thoughts are on them. You have Micah Parsons there. You have a pretty solid front 7 all around, but you have a secondary where even with the loss of Trevon Diggs that we all thought, ooh, that's going to be a tough one for the Cowboys to have to overcome, Deron Blaine has stepped up and the dude just has found a way to be a ball hawk. The Cowboys always had a pretty solid secondary, to say the very least, surrounding Trevon Diggs, and I think it's really shown here in the last stretch of the season where, yeah, there's some pretty good players there. So it's going to be a very tough task for Jordan Love to be able to go in there and maybe replicate that of which his predecessors have done in the past and break the hearts of the Cowboys fans. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen. But again, we're going to give our official predictions once we finish talking about all these games. So Justin, get those predictions a turn in the brain because you're going to have to share them at the end. You don't need to give a score, by the way. If you want to, you very much can. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. We'll see about that on the program. But yes, those are my thoughts on that game. And then when it comes to Bills Steelers, I think for me, like you mentioned, the weather's going to play an effect. The level of play of the Steelers defense is going to play an effect. I think for the Bills, who is going to break out on that offense in the playoffs? Because we've seen in playoff games past, wherever they've won or lost, random players have been able to show out for the Bills in previous postseason games. You think about the 4-touchdown effort that Gabe Davis showed us in playoff pass, where we thought that was going to make him more of a player on this team than what we believed in the definitive wide receiver too. Turns out, hasn't really been the case since then. From that game to what has transpired since. Cook, I think, is going to be a guy to watch out for with Buffalo, because if they could get a semblance of rushing that is not just Josh Allen taking it, running, and trying to Superman dive over 3 Steelers defenders while they hit him midair, if they can get something from him, I think it's going to be a very telltale sign of what this game is going to look like. Like you said, I think this is going to be a pretty ugly game, to say the very least, between these 2 teams, and there's going to be a lot of big third downs happening, I think, in Steelers Bills. And I think, this might sound obvious, but to me, whoever is the best at converting on these third downs, I think that's going to be the thing that ultimately decides this. Whichever team is able to somehow keep drives alive in these conditions is going to be who takes that game, to say the very least. So that's my thoughts on those 2 contests. Rick, we go to you to close out the 2 versus 7 analysis.
You know who has the most career rushing yards against the Cowboys in a minimum of 3 games played? It's Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones in 3 games against the Cowboys has averaged 123 yards per game on the ground against Dallas. That's more than Barry Sanders, who's second at 119, and Sweetness, Walter Payton, who's third with 115. Now, that's the game plan for Dallas. If you're Micah Parsons and Marcus Lawrence and these guys, is take away that angle. Like, make Jordan Love throw the ball against the secondary. I know they're not the greatest secondary, but, the reason why Jordan Love has been able to kind of be as good as he has been in the past few weeks is because Aaron Jones has rushed for 100 yards or more in 3 straight games. So if you're the Cowboys and you can take away that rushing attack and make Green Bay a one-dimensional offense, Jordan Love will eventually find Tucker Kraft somewhere. He'll eventually find his wide receivers somewhere, but force him into a bad day, and I think you'll be fine. This is a game where, and similar way for Green Bay too. If they can find a way to really pressure Dak Prescott, because he's had a good season, but he's one bad game away from being same old Dak Prescott. And it could happen in the playoffs. And again, at this Green Bay front, I know we talked a lot about the Dallas defense. Well, give Green Bay's defense their flowers too. I mean, Rashawn Gary's been an excellent player for them, I think, all season long. And this is a team that goes into this with house money. You made it as a 7 seed. Congratulations. You beat the 2 seed. That's fine. Good for you. In that Buffalo-Pittsburgh game, I think the weather favors Buffalo for the simple reason that it's going to force the Bills to go on the ground a lot more. And you saw how well James Cook performed against the Cowboys. Well, the flip side of that is that you do not have to then worry about Josh Allen throwing the ball because of his 18 interceptions going into the postseason and 22 turnovers. I mean, that kind of takes away from everything, and it makes the Steelers' front seven really have to work hard against this Bills O-line. Now, again, last year we had a similar game in the snow in Buffalo, and the Bills failed to show up against the Bengals. But it's a little different because the Steelers' O-line is not as good as the Bengals' O-line was in that game last year. It's interesting because, again, the game plan on both sides is going to be run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Like, very rarely, because you're looking at these wind gusts of over 50 miles an hour. It's running. I'll guarantee you that the field's gotten a lot shorter for converting for offensive points. Like Tyler Bass and Chris Boswell, they're not going to try anything past 40 yards in this game. Especially if it's a crosswind, nuh-uh. Like, it's going to be a lot of fourth down attempts too, because the punting game is also going to be a problem too. This is going to be a game of field position as well as it is a game of ball control. So, I don't know. I mean, again, when you're a 7 seed, you have nothing to lose. Even if you're banged up like the Steelers are and you don't have your top-tier defensive player of the year caliber candidate, you still got a lot of good weapons on that D-line to really mess with Buffalo in this regard. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be very exciting to watch both these games go for very different reasons. And I think they'll both be close. They'll be a lot closer than you expect. And I think we could see some fireworks. So I'm looking forward to it.
Indeed. And that's what we want in the postseason. We want good, close football. Now, good will be a topic of discussion when it comes to that Steelers-Bills game, thanks to the weather. But overall, it should be interesting. And, it's very fun because you see the 4 teams that are highlighting the 2 versus 7s, between the conferences. You have the Steelers and the Cowboys and the Packers all have won a number of Super Bowls throughout those franchises' histories, right? And the Buffalo Bills, who we've said it on the 2+ years this podcast has been going, trying to exercise demons of Bills teams' failures past, and this own Bills team's run as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what they could do. But boys, I mentioned the history of these 4 teams. Let's talk about some history between teams in games that is a lot more interconnected than meets the eye. The 4 versus 5 matchup in the AFC and the 3 versus 6 in the NFC have teams that are very, very familiar with each other, to say the very least. It is the Houston Texans, the AFC South winners of this 2023 season, going up against the wild card Cleveland Browns. Those 2 teams, of course, made the notorious trade here for one Deshaun Watson. And funny enough, Deshaun Watson's not playing in this game, so it really just goes to show that, that was a rough trade, to say the very least. And so those 2 teams are meeting up with the trade that they've made since then. Ironically, first time each team has made the postseason since that trade has happened. And they're facing each other. What a way to write a story. And also, let's talk about the 3 versus 6 on the other side. The NFC North champion Detroit Lions going up against the 6th seed in the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams. The quarterbacks that both these teams traded to one another, still there, still going. Jared Goff, the former Los Angeles Ram, made a Super Bowl with that team, sent to Detroit, has now helped them win the division, going up against the LA Rams with a now healthy Matthew Stafford compared to what was just a awful 2022 season for this team where everything fell apart, but they were able to pick back up the pieces, make the postseason yet again, and their Super Bowl winning quarterback, their Super Bowl winning coach, their Super Bowl winning defensive tackle are there. And that one especially has the history is even tied closer because the quarterbacks are still there, the people are still there, and the matchup is going to be fun to see. So, Rick, I'll throw that game over. Well, I'll throw those games over to you first. You talk about whichever one you want to discuss first. But, Lions and Rams, Browns, Texans, 2 teams that made transactions with one another, now facing in the postseason. You talk about fireworks. There could be some intriguing plays and such to come out from these 2 contests.
Yeah, I think these are 2 of the more fun games that you're going to see this weekend because you have all that added intrigue with the Lions, right? Because they haven't hosted a playoff game since 1991. And the first game that they host when they get back is with the guy who they picked as their franchise quarterback back in 2009 on the team that he was traded to, who then won the Super Bowl for the guy that was the number 1 pick for them. The story writes itself there. The thing with that game is that, as I mentioned, the Rams are a very potent offensive team. I think we saw Kyron Williams really come into his own this season as their chief running back. And again, The Rams have kind of lacked that running attack in years past, and you couple that with Cooper Kupp and the emergence of Puka Nacua, and it makes this Rams offense really dangerous against a good to great, depending on the game, Lions defense. They can be really good in the front seven, but they can also give up a lot of big plays, and that's kind of what can hurt them in the grand scheme of everything. So on the flip side too, look, the Lions have a lot of weapons. I don't know if we know the status of Sam Laporta, but that's a big loss if they don't have him out. Like, luckily, it wasn't that big of an injury. I think it was a hyperextended knee, which is still a significant injury, but it wasn't an ACL tear, which was just brutal. Thanks, Mike McDaniel. You ruined up Bradley Chubb for us. Thanks. Appreciate that. I'll get to that a little later. But if they don't have Sam Laporta, it kind of takes away from that because they have Montgomery and Gibbs. They have a couple of good receivers, but without their rookie tight end there, that offense lacks a little bit of oomph, And so that game, I think, could come down to that. Whoever's healthy and whoever's ready to go, you could see something interesting there between those two teams. On the converse side, surprising. The 4-5 matchup is a surprise because I think we expected it to be the AFC South champion. They didn't have to be the Texans. I can tell you that much. They did not expect it to be them. And this is a team that has seemed to just looked at every bit of adversity and kind of just shrugged its shoulders and moved on from there because, again, Stroud goes out for a bit. Tank Dell misses the whole rest of the season after the tear. They've had a bunch of other. Noah Brown's been in and out of the lineup. Nico Collins have been in and out of the lineup. They've relied on a decent running game. Devin Singletary has kind of had a really, really good resurgent season. Their defense has cost them. Remember that Panthers game when Desmond King kind of ruined their chance and the Panthers got their first win? They've had their moments here and there. They've been a young, undisciplined at times, unlucky at times team, but here they are as the 4th seed hosting a wild card game, and you look across the field, and whoever thought the Cleveland Browns would be in the position that they're in right now, man, on their 4th quarterback, no less, because it ain't Deshaun Watson, which for the Masseurs in Houston is probably a good thing for them. It's not DTR because, concussion protocol. It's not XFL MVP PJ Walker, who'll probably go back to the UFL now. It's 39-year-old Joseph Q. Flacco leading this squad without Nick Chubb. So they've had to rely on a bevy of whoever it is running backs. Kareem Hunt has kind of come back into the fold for some reason. David Njoku's been really good. Amari Cooper's been a stud. And this defense has just been incredible. It's one of those matchups where it's like, if you love just random matchups, this is the game for you because this is the most random matchup you could possibly expect going into this postseason. I hope it's fun because the Texans in the playoffs have either had fun games or why are you even in the playoffs games? TJ Yates, stand up and say hi. So, it's going to be one of those moments where like you hope it's a good game, and these two could be the show stealers this weekend because, again, Rams-Lions has all that history and intrigue, and Texans-Browns, it's just a fresh matchup. It's exciting to see it. And, again, I think what helps, too, is the auspices of Deshaun Watson are not even there. It's all about Flacco, which I think will really help sell this game. Because if it was Deshaun Watson going back to Houston, you'd have a lot of problems from a PR standpoint. But because it's Joe Flacco, and it's that story, and also, to be fair, this game could decide who wins Coach of the Year. Just putting it out there.
Well, I mean, have they not already filled out their ballots? I think they would have probably filled out their ballots at this point, if not before the games have to happen. But
they could win the fan vote.
Yeah, win the fan vote, to say the very least. Now, I'm with you. It definitely makes it interesting. Not only is the Deshaun Watson trade, Rick, remember, these two teams made another quarterback trade before that. The Brock Osweiler infamous trade between the Texans and the Browns.
Yeah, we don't talk about Brock Osweiler.
He should be the guest of honor at that point.
Yeah, right.
But no, in all seriousness, let me get to the games. I kind of already spoke about it before. Again, shout out to the Houston Texans, the future of this team. You have a coach of the future. You have a quarterback of the future. Some people don't like that GM personally, but he has been able to finally find a way to get the coach and the quarterback there. So we'll see if he can build out the rest of the roster on a pretty good basis as well. But if you're the Houston Texans, a very bright future ahead of you. Now into this matchup against, there's some veterans on the Texans, but this is a pretty young team going up against a veteran-laden team. This is a Browns squad that has a coach in Kevin Stefanski, who prior to the season some people, on this show included, were calling maybe is his job on the line. This is a team with a quarterback who has seen everything, who has seen the highest of highs in the NFL and has seen the lowest of lows. This is a defense that has ride high, and they've won games themselves, and they've also been let down by their offense in games, not just in this year, but years past. This is a team that has made the postseason in the past with these defensive players who they've come this close to unseating the Kansas City Chiefs a couple years ago. This is that same Browns team. A lot of these guys were there for that game, and this is a very intriguing mix of predominantly youth versus predominantly veterans. I always love a savvy matchup like that, to say the very least. But, I just think too much attrition has happened to the Texans for them to win this one. I do think it'll be relatively close. I don't think it'll be a blowout necessarily, but I do think the Browns defense will play like a team, a side of the field possessed on this one, because I think they smell blood in the water, and I think they look at the landscape of the AFC, and there's prime opportunity there. So expect the Browns defense to make a couple plays in this one, to say the very least. The drive-ending plays is going to be the story of this. And even on the Texans side as well, they could stop the Browns from being efficient as they've been. You mentioned the running game, Rick, with Kareem Hunt and Jacoby Ford, the two of them. Or no, Jerome Ford, I think, actually, not Jacoby Ford. Jacoby Ford is a previous, I think, Raiders wide receiver, was he?
Jacoby Jones, Jacoby Ford, Jacoby Myers, who the hell knows?
All of them. But no, Ford and Hunt have been a part of the running game, like you said. And Joe Flacco, the man who is undefeated in his career in wildcard games and actually is up there for most career road playoff games. Can he do it again? We will wait and see there. And when it comes to Rams-Lions, this is certainly one where it could go back and forth. These are two teams that offensively definitely know how to make things happen. Like you mentioned, Rick, Sam Laporta being out is going to be a big one, but the running attacks on these two teams with Kyren Williams on the Rams side and the two-headed beast of Montgomery and Gibbs over for the Detroit Lions. Goff and Stafford potentially can go back and forth, and you have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown on the other side. Man, there's talent in offensive talent in those two. I think it'll ultimately be a case of which defense is going to break a little bit more than the other one just bends, is the way it'll go. Because the Rams, while there have been their defense has made a play or two, not the most consistent thing in the world. There's still a couple things in that defense that need work, especially the secondary. I think you could almost argue to an extent on both sides, but I think especially the Rams are the ones that need it the most. The Lions, this will be intriguing. Again, you have on one side the veteran Aaron Donald, on the other side the young, hungry Aiden Hutchinson being one of the young leaders, if not the young leader on this defense that is trying to make things happen for this team. A defense that also features a Jack Campbell at linebacker and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJ GJ, who with some injury issues early in the season is still a veteran for this team in his presence in his own right. This is going to be a very... this could potentially be the highest scoring game of the weekend. Now, it depends on one other matchup that we're going to get to here in a couple moments, but this could be the highest scoring game of the weekend, depending on how things play out. So I think it'll be two electric games, to say the least. Justin, your thoughts on these two matchups before we move on to the last two?
This is, in my mind, where the money is. So I know we covered some AFC matchups. Also, am I doing the two NFC or the two AFC? Or are we doing back and forth?
Browns, Texans, and Lions, Rams is what we're covering now.
Okay. So I think that as great as Houston has been, this is probably the end. Let's talk about how Joe Flacco is currently undefeated in wildcard games, by the way. And as good as the Texans have been this year, I don't think that they can match up to this Browns defense. When they were healthier, they didn't match up well against this Browns defense. They lost what was not a close games. So unfortunately, I think this is probably going to be the end. I do agree, though, Rick, both these guys should be coach of the year. They've been excellent to overcome the adversity that Cleveland has overcome this far. Whether or not they win or lose, I mean, it's just been incredible. They scored 4 quarterbacks this year. They brought Joe Flacco out of retirement for this run. So it's really been something. And to me, this is the matchup of the year in the NFC. For Detroit to finally host a playoff game and for Stafford to be on the other sideline is just the script writers were working hard on this one. I got a question. If Goff wins the Super Bowl, and I'm not declaring them the winner by any chance, but is this the biggest win-win trade of all time?
Has to be. If a trade that directly leads to both teams winning a championship, I I can't think of another trade that directly impacts it in terms of the players still being there and leading to that success for both teams.
I'm not sure who I want to pick in this game either. I mean, I think that the Lions are rightfully favored being at home and having the better defensive line and maybe the same caliber of offensive weapon, maybe a little less. I mean, their running game is definitely stronger. Kyron Williams has been great for LA, but I mean, if we're talking running games, Montgomery and Gibbs have been a powerhouse this year. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is still one of the most underrated receivers in football, and he's rated pretty highly. So I do expect Puka and Kupp to have good games, but I don't expect their offense to hum as strongly as Detroit. But I expect it to be high scoring.
To say the very least. And again, I really do think that Rams-Lions game could be the highest scoring game of this weekend. I think there is one that could overcome it, but it's going to take a lot from those two teams to have to do so. Let's move on to the final two games that we want to cover. And I know people are like, well, guys, there was a trade between two of these teams facing off. Why was it not included in the previous category? You want to know why? Because those two teams sucked in the last month of the season, and they are limping into the playoffs right now. And on the other side, you have two other teams that are limping into the playoffs. So this is the two games of teams just barely getting into the postseason and not looking all that impressive doing so. This is the not impressive into playoffs game. That's a really long tagline, but we'll figure it out in marketing some way, shape, or form. But the Kansas City Chiefs and Miami Dolphins, the final of the AFC games we have not covered, and the Philadelphia Eagles going into Tampa Bay to face the NFC South winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, dear Lord in heaven, someone finally won that division. It took until the last dang week to do it. Yay. Let's go. I'll start things off really quick on both these sides, and then I'll throw it over to you, boys. When it comes to the Tampa Bay Philly game, I actually just saw this. I don't know if either of you saw the update now, but A.J. Brown, despite all the rehab that he's attempted to do, is officially ruled as out for the game on Monday. So the Eagles are going to be without their number one wide receiver, to say the very least. And it's going to be tough for them. They didn't look that impressive the last month of the season, really ever since that stretch where they lost to the Niners and the Cowboys. I forget. I think, were those games back-to-back, or was there a game in between them? I forget what the exact situation was.
Back-to-back.
Back-to-back. So really, ever since those rough losses, this team started out 10-1. One game that they took a victory in since then. This Eagles team, just the offense has looked erratic at best. No semblance of consistency. A team that was seen as dominant in terms of being able to score, and we believe that we hadn't seen the best of them yet. Well, it's funny, we still haven't seen the best of them, and that has what has led us to this situation. It's going to take a lot of internal fortitude for this Eagles team to take a step. I can't believe we have to say this, to win the wild card game in any sort of convincing manner, because I will say this about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For all the doubts that we had at the beginning of the season, which for now a second year in a row, Justin and I, who we believe would be a top 3 pick contender, is now in the wild card round of the playoffs. Justin, I think we're missing something here. So whoever we think is going to be a 3-win team next year, Justin, we should just say they're going to make the 7th seed, is I think what we have to go through in our thought process. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a defense with pieces on it. You still have the linebacking duo of Levante David and Devin White there as, veteran presences, kind of the last two holdovers for the most. There's another piece or two, but the last two main holdovers from that Super Bowl team from a couple years ago. Antoine Winfield Jr., who, by the way, made an all-pro team, somehow didn't make the Pro Bowl. Good luck on figuring that out, NFL. Being the leader in the secondary. This is a Bucs defense that in moments this season, they held serve. And they helped win this team games. And then in other moments, the offense was able to make do with things, and Baker Mayfield was looking pretty good. Mike Evans, a lot of people may have been concerned that early in the season that his streak of 1,000-yard seasons was coming into an end. Nah. Mike Evans has looked pretty good. He still looks like he's at the peak of his powers, even with a different quarterback. This dude could just do it with anybody at this point for the most part. So that is a pretty impressive Tampa Bay offense. I don't blame a lot of people for seeing this as one of the popular upset picks of this round because, man, oh man, this Tampa Bay team could shock a lot of people. And for the dreck that was the NFC South, and this is why they're in this category, because let's be real here, winning the NFC South is the equivalent of limping in, especially with only beating the Panthers 9-0 at the end of the season in order to do so. Tampa Bay not necessarily looking the most impressive coming in, but they won that division, and they're hosting the home playoff game, and this could be an interesting one, to say the least. And yes, the Eagles, as I mentioned, just what has happened to Philly? This is a case of a team just completely falling apart. So we will see what happens there. I think the biggest key factor is just the Eagles show up. You need to finally play. We talked about this before earlier in the season when they were winning games, actually. But we had not seen the Eagles yet play a full 60-minute game. I don't understand how a team can win 11 games in a year without playing a full 60-minute contest the entire time. And they finally need to start doing that. And you almost need to ask, can they start doing that this year? Or is this just going to be the worst like Super Bowl participant hangover of all time where they actually still somehow made the playoffs, but they're just going to completely, crash and burn out, and that could lead to significant changes in the team in some way, shape, or form. We'll see how it goes. And then on the other side of things, Chiefs-Dolphins, what can I say? This could be the game that outscores the Rams-Lions potential fireworks. This could also be a game that somehow finishes 17-14 because these teams just can't figure it out. But the Kansas City Chiefs defense is probably one of the more impressive defenses that the Chiefs have had in the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelce era. And this is a defense that can certainly make plays. They have great cornerback play. From the young pieces in the secondary that have led the way. Nick Bolton has been great for them. Chris Jones, despite missing the first couple of games of the season, still hit double-digit sacks. It just goes to show that dude's really good at getting to the quarterback and just being a massive difference maker. I think defense is going to make the difference. The Dolphins are way too banged up, and that Chiefs defense will be able to do their thing and get to the Dolphins enough to be able to make a difference. I will say this, Tyreek Hill is certainly, laden to go off. We finally get the Tyreek Hill game in Kansas City, which I know this could have put this game in the previous segment of us talking about trades that link teams. But I think the biggest story with these two teams is not even that anymore. It's the fact that they both barely got into the postseason. The Kansas City Chiefs got a little bit lucky with winning the division. Took to the second last week of this season for them to finally clinch the AFC at West in any time of comfort. And the Dolphins losing the AFC East at the very end of the regular season with a lot of dropped games that realistically they could have and should have won. So I think that is the case with these two teams limping in their own ways. I think the Chiefs will be able to do just enough defensively. I think it's the defense that's going to be the reason they win this, and the offense is going to just do a bit to be able to win this. And we have not had to say that about a Kansas City Chiefs team yet, and that is what makes this interesting. Rick, I'll throw it to you first. Your thoughts on these two matchups going into the wild card weekend? One of them, Chiefs-Dolphins. Is it the Saturday? Is it the game tonight, or is it one of the games tomorrow? I forget.
Well, that's part of why I want to discuss this. That's the Peacock game.
Oh,
I got some things to say about that.
Should we have Justin go first so then you could finish
go
it
ahead,
off?
Go ahead. Although Justin. I do want to say before he starts, I have this breaking news update from Kansas City. That's Taylor Swift right there. She's frozen because how cold it's going to be. So, yeah.
Justin, your thoughts on these two games then?
All right. Look, as much as I want this to be a really good game, I think that absolutely nothing is going Miami's way going into this matchup. The weather aside, I mean, it's supposed to be one of the coldest games in NFL history. They said there might be a little snow. This is not something that's boding well for Miami. I mean, forget the fact that they're losing. What do they have? 4 starters out now. They announced that Van Ginkel is done for the year as well, which is a major blow to them. They're not an experienced playoff team. I don't see them doing very much. We'll see, but like I said, it's not something. I'm picking Kansas City probably 10 out of 10 times in this situation. That being said, I'm not so sure about Philly. If we really want to discuss it, I mean, they lost 5 of their last 6 games, 2 of which to a Giants team. One of the games was not close. And the one that was close, that came down to the very end, that was the one that was in your stadium. You couldn't go into New York and beat the Giants when you needed a win on losing 5 out of the last 6 games. That's bad, man. That's really bad. And I got news for you. Matchup-wise, they do not match up well against a team built the way that Tampa Bay is built. They are going to stop the run. They're going to force you to try and throw the ball. They're going to force Jalen Hurts into bad situations and try and get him to make mistakes. And they don't really have a lot of people that can stop Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I mean, let's not forget that Godwin had a down season, but Godwin is still there. Godwin is liable to go off for 125 yards in a game. Yeah, would you be surprised if he had 125 yards and a touchdown against the Eagles? I certainly wouldn't be. So it's interesting. We'll see which direction these teams go in, but I'm not necessarily right off the bat picking Philadelphia. I might have to go the other way.
Teasing the people. We will give our predictions after Rick gives his thoughts on the two games. By the way, we're going to go AFC, then NFC for the predictions, boys, just so you two are prepared for that. So, Rick, send us off in the game analysis, and then we'll give the people our pick.
So I'm going to start with the Tampa Bay Philadelphia game. This is the Antoine Winfield Jr. revenge tour game. Yeah, he got first team All-Pro, but he got snubbed from the Pro Bowl by, I'm not sure if you saw his father's tweet about Budda Baker's stats compared to his. Antoine Winfield Jr. has had an incredible season for the Bucs, and it's kind of gone unnoticed because it's the Bucs. But the fact that there's no A.J. Brown means that there's only a hobbled Devontae Smith that you really have to worry about if you're the Bucs, because for some reason the Eagles this year decided, let's go away from Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra. Like, let's not use them at all in some games. By the way, the Eagles are 0-2 in the state of New Jersey this year because, remember, they lost to the Jets earlier this season, which was the greatest game for the Jets this season, I think. Until the Patriots win. But, you know.
No, this one was better.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Look, you're right. This Eagles team is just a shell of their former self, and it's so weird to not know why. Like, did Miles Sanders make that much of a difference in the locker room? Like, when they put DeAndre Swift in there, it didn't work out. I mean, what other differences are there for this team that, you know, have they run the gambit too much on drafting Georgia players? Is that the problem now? Like, their secondary is very, very hit or miss. James Bradbury has not had the greatest season. Neither have guys like Ringo and Ricks. And you're still trying to rely on them and Reed Blankenship to really help you out when you've got the Bucs offense that, as you mentioned, Evans and Godwin. That's all you need to know about this.
Yeah.
And okay, they don't have like their main targets, like their other receiving options. So they're still
they have the two most important.
You know what? And Cade Otton's become a really big player for them down the stretch. So even if you get past the front seven, the Bucs are still a dangerous team. And the fact that it's in Tampa, I think just makes it even further. Now,
real quick, Rick, before you go, the Eagles defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia.
Yep.
He has dropped the ball. People wanted Jonathan Gannon fired last season. I can only imagine what the Eagles fans
and again, I understand the games were closer, but what was so wrong about the defense that Sean Desai had to go that isn't wrong about the offense? Like, this Eagles team, they may be a fraud.
Yeah.
They may be. I think they might be. If they lose this game, clearly a fraud. Now, the NFL has found two ways to screw its fans. Well, three ways. Number one, the first Kansas City-Miami game, the first Tyreek Hill vengeance game, which I believe was a Chiefs home game, if I'm not mistaken, goes to Germany. Yeah, okay. I mean, look, I get it, but then why would you give the Germany the Panthers this year coming up? Like, do you want them to have good football or not? Let's be real here. Number two, they decide to keep this game in Kansas City when it's going to be minus 30 wind chill. Like, first of all, open air stadium, minus 30 wind chill, move the game somewhere else or play it on a different day, because you're going to have fans that are going to be absolutely frozen to their seats, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. And number three, and the biggest one, you put this game, a playoff game, an exclusive playoff game, behind a paywall, and you drum it up by saying, oh, you can get a full year of Peacock after this for $30 for the whole year because buy it for this game. Who the hell wants to watch Peacock for anything else other than the NFL? Like, why are you doing this? Why? This is the worst thing you could have possibly done. This game on Peacock? What are you going to do next, put the Super Bowl on Nickelodeon? Oh, you're doing that this year? God damn, NFL. You could not have figured out a way to make this less appealing of a game. I will refuse to watch this game tonight because I'm not watching it because it's on Peacock, even though I have it. I'm refusing on principle. And number two, if I watch this game and see how cold the fans are, I don't care if the fireplace is on in my house. I'm going to be freezing my butt off like they are in Arrowhead. Like, come on. Why? That being said, Justin's right. Miami has no chance in this game. I'm sorry. Like, you lost so many pieces on this team, and all your other offensive guys are so banged up. Like, I get Kansas City's not the Kansas City of old, but you don't have your stars. And that is the killer right there. Yeah. That's the killer.
Yeah. And the guys that actually are playing, they're banged up. A lot of guys throughout these games banged up, to say the very least, boys. So that being said, let's finish off the show here. Let's get to our playoff picks. We'll start AFC and then the NFC. Let's just go in seeding order from top to bottom on who the home teams are. So let's start Bills Steelers game. I'll begin the proceedings. I'll say just barely the Bills are going to win this game, but it's going to be an extremely close down to the wire. I think this could be like 17. You don't have to give a score, but if I had to give like a range, I would say something along the lines of 17-14 potentially, if that. So I'll say the Bills barely take this one.
I agree. It's going to be a close game. I don't even know if it's going to get that high scoring. I want to pick the Steelers. I really, really do. But the Bills are the better team. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sticking true to what I said in preseason, then this game, ironically, by the way, the Steelers are the 7th seed, so I got that right on the nose.
There
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think the Bills take this one. I agree with Justin. I don't think this is going to get that high scoring. I see this being 13-7 because I see this being that low because of how bad the weather is going to be and just the fact that these two teams are going to try and move the ball and it's going to be a battlefield position. I see this being a really low-scoring game.
Yeah. Do you think, real quick, just a yes or no, do you think we'll actually see some 2-point attempts in this one when teams finally score just so they don't have to kick the point after, depending on the wind?
Could be.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea even without the wind because, again, the way they've changed everything, it's from the 1 yard line now makes it a lot easier to do it. So I would, especially with these offenses, I would.
Yeah. All right. Next game, Chiefs-Dolphins. I think we all just said it. We all agree Chiefs are winning this one.
Yeah. Like I said, Dolphins at full strength make this a much better game, but Dolphins at full strength will also be the 2 seed, not the 6 seed. So,
Fair.
Yeah.
And last one, Texans-Browns. I'm going with the Browns in this one. Their defense is going to do their thing. What about you two?
I agree.
He wants to be the differentiator here.
I'm a little torn here, but like I said,
back and forth on this game all day.
I have been.
Texans, and then he was betting on the Browns.
I've been back and forth this game all week, like not just the day, all week. Yeah. Look, the Texans. It's a great story, but they're just so inexperienced. That might be what puts them over the top. But Cleveland's just a better team. The overalls are pretty close, but I would give it to the Browns. It's close. Until the third quarter, I think the Browns start pulling away a little bit, but give it to the Browns.
Nice. All right, let's go to the NFC. We'll start with the 2-7, Cowboys versus Packers. Does anyone want to be the differentiator here, or are the Cowboys winning this one, boys?
Do it, Rick. Do it.
I still have my Bears fandom card, so no, Cowboys for me.
There it is. So Cowboys over the Packers. We've swept it so far, but I think one of these two games is definitely going to change it for us. Lions, Rams. I'm making Rick pick this one first. Rick, who you got?
I got to stick with the Super Bowl pick. And I picked the Lions to go to the Super Bowl, so I got to stick with it. I mean, look, it's going to be a definite dogfight, but I think the Lions are going to eke it out, and it's going to be a nice win for the Lions at home for the first time in God knows how long.
Yep. Justin, what about you?
I'm excited to see my first ever Lions playoff win.
Let's go. Okay, yeah, I will complete that for us. Lions, I think, again, that this could be the most high-scoring game of the weekend. I would say like a 31-28 type score is what we could potentially expect. I think these two teams can just be dynamite offensively. All right, last game. This is the one. Justin, I'm throwing this one to you first. Bucks, Eagles. Who you got?
Guys, I'm gonna go with the Bucks. I'm gonna spurn my team that gave me all that success over the last 2 years, and I'm gonna say that there is something really wrong there right now. Probably get it corrected in the offseason. I'm sure. I believe in Howie Roseman, but I just don't think they match up well against the Bucks. This is the game that screams upset to me.
I don't blame you. Rick, what about you?
The narrative of this game, if it goes the way that Justin's saying it, is that the Eagles fans are going to be screaming to get rid of Sirianni and bring in Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel after this offseason. And I think they're going to get their wish because I think Tampa's the better team right now. I get Philadelphia's got those weapons, but they are not the same team they were last year. And you know what? I'll give you another spoiler. It ain't going to be close. I think Tampa blows them out of the water in this game. Yeah, I think Philadelphia keeps it close in the first half, and Tampa just outguns them in the third and the fourth. I think the Bucs will run away with this one.
Are we gonna go 6 for 6?
But by the way, just before you make that pick, Jerk, I just want to remind everybody at home that I went 6-0 last year on the wild card round. So
He would go back for the math. I will be, I try to keep my picks consistent on on the two sports podcasts I do, so I'll keep this consistent. I will go with barely winning the Eagles. I think that they will do just enough to win this game by like a field goal at most, and then they will get rightfully stomped in the next round because if these picks hold, they will be the lowest seed going into the divisional round of the NFC. And who gets to just curb stomp them into the ground in Santa Clara? San Francisco. And I want to do that for the 49ers. I want to give them their revenge game. So the Eagles are barely going to win this one to me. But like you said, Rick, I think it goes one of two ways. Either the Eagles win by a field goal or the Bucs beat them by like 2 or 3 scores. I think that's like, I don't think there's any in between when it comes to those.
Yeah, like I said, there's something really, really off about this Philadelphia Eagles team. And I mean, look, the Bucs may be 9-8, but Baker Mayfield's had a great season, and they've still got a lot of good ones. Even Rashad White can be a really, really, really big play turner at the end of the day for them. So
is this the second? Is this the second straight quarterback that they're going to regret giving that contract to so quickly? Maybe. We'll see, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of we'll see how these games play out, and we'll talk about the results of them on next week's edition here of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Make sure you come back next week on Twitter and YouTube to get our reactions to these games, how we thought everything went down, and what we think will then happen in the divisional round and our playoff picks for that as well. And of course, any coaching moves happen, we'll talk about that here as well on the podcast that is known for fun, football, and chaos. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll see you guys next time.